to 6, a helping hand with your land.
Neil from Essex here. When you go through and you buy a new tractor, there is a seemingly unending list of accessories and options that you could get for your machine. We're going to go through and talk today about which ones of those are good to consider buying up front with a new tractor purchase, and which ones might be okay delaying to some point down the road. Now, before we go through each one of these things, there are a driver or two here that you might want to consider. If you're going to be financing your tractor purchase, any of those implements, options, any of that stuff that you buy up front generally can be rolled into that financing. So if you're going to be taking a 060, 084, whatever it is, you do have the benefit of paying for all of those things in that initial purchase and taking that out and including it as part of your tractor payment. Anything that you do after the fact, small kits, obviously it's a $200 light kit, no big deal. You can pay for that in cash. But if you have more significant options, a lot of times the financing options are pretty limited. There are a handful of more expensive ones that we can get, like a 024 or something like that on, but your financing options are always going to be better by rolling things into the initial tractor purchase. There is also some efficiency gained when a dealership is doing the installation of these kits in the fact that we already have the tractor. We have the machine in the shop, we're prepping it for you, we're putting on the loaders and the mower decks. Going through and say installing a light kit for you is pretty trivial at that point because we already have the tractor there. But if you're taking that machine home and we now need to go out and pick it up and bring it back here, you could incur some extra trucking costs in the simple running back and forth and the time that it takes machines to get queued and into the shop and that kind of thing. So for those couple of reasons, those might be drivers as we go through and talk about some of these individual kits that might push you to buying them up front even when they are an easy purchase after the fact. So one of those things that's an easy purchase after the fact, not when you're buying your initial tractor, are work lights. If you look to put work lights up onto your roll bar or adding them onto the front or the back of the cab, the work that it goes through to put those lights onto the tractor are nearly the same, whether we're doing it initially in the shop or we're doing it on another machine after the fact. The wiring harnesses, all that work still needs done just the same, and there's really nothing that's going to save you any effort by doing that up front. Next up is loader valves. You'll notice here sitting on my tractor off to my right hand side, I have a loader valve that's integrated into the tractor that's going to operate a front loader or front attachments. Now, not every tractor that we sell goes out with a loader valve on it. In some of these machines, it can be ordered as optional equipment. The BX series machines are this way. You can actually order a configuration of this tractor that does not have this loader valve integrated into the fender. Now, if you go through, you're going to save a couple $100s by making that selection if you were buying this as just a mowing tractor. But if you ever decided down the road that you wanted to put on a front snowblower or a front loader or anything that's going to use this hydraulic valve, installing integrated hydraulic valves after the fact are extremely complicated and very expensive. While you might save a couple $100 up front, it can cost you thousands of dollars to do that down the road because of the extent that a tractor has to be torn apart in order to put on an integrated loader valve. This is the way the nicer valves are done on the more modern tractors. This is not necessarily the case for an economy machine where you'll find the loader valve up in front of the tractor up on the loader. Those can very easily be added at any point. But these, you want to get integrated on the tractor when you buy the machine, regardless of how you're going to be financing it or using it down the road. The bigger our tractors get, the more common rear hydraulic outlets become. The smallest machines, when you get in any kind of utility class tractor, are going to come with one remote. You get into our biggest field tractors, they can have up to 5 or sometimes additional complex hydraulic plumbings coming out the back. When you go through and you buy a tractor, there is some cost savings to buying all the remotes that you're going to need up front with that tractor, and that has to do with the installation time of putting these on. Sometimes the factory is going to install these things and they'll come through with some kind of standard equipment, but more often than not, many times these valves are dealer installed regardless of the machines coming from the factory or we're customizing one for you off the lot. When we go through and do the installation of these valves, generally we're going to have to pull the side tire off of the tractor. A lot of times we're prepping a new machine and we're doing things like installing backhoes or setting up tire spacing and stuff the first time. that's a little bit of a labor savings for us, right? So you can go through and buy these valves up front, and you don't have the additional time that it takes in the shop to pull the tire, maybe pull a seat out of the cab in order to get up into the right places where the lever segment goes up inside the machine. You'll find that most tractors don't come through with standard equipment, rear wipers, rear corner defoggers, or the heating grids across the back windows. For us here in the Northeast, where we do snow removal, installing these optional kits is actually fairly common. And your more southern climates where they're buying cabs primarily for air conditioning and not for wintertime use, these kinds of things aren't frequently installed, so it's something that we tend to see quite a lot of. There would not be a whole lot of labor savings in buying those kits up front, so you very easily could decide to forego that extra expense on the front side. Try running your tractor in the wintertime, see if the factory vents keep these things clear enough for you, and if you find they don't work well enough, adding those kits after the fact is nearly the same amount of labor doing them later versus buying a machine up front. Seems silly to talk about a loader like optional equipment, but you'll be surprised every once in a while we'll get somebody who's kind of on the fence whether they want to purchase a loader with their tractor or not. Now, I'm going to sit here and tell you, if there's any question in your mind, just buy the darn thing, because you're going to be surprised how often you use it. Many people underestimate the number of things that they're going to find to do with a front loader. In terms of buying that loader with the tractor, probably the biggest driver to do that would be the financing. Loaders are going to be more expensive implements, and so buying it with the tractor and being able to roll it into the tractor's financing is a big plus in most cases. Outside of that though, the installation of a loader onto a tractor is actually fairly easy, especially on the machines that are going to come through as what we would call loader ready, or where that hydraulic valve is already integrated into the tractor. On most of these machines, we very simply have a couple of bolts to run into the side of the frame to hold the side mounting kits on, drop the loader back into that rack, hook up the hydraulics, and go. And so that labor difference now versus later doesn't really matter a whole lot. The next item is going to be 3-point hitch implements. Now, any of your 3-point hitch stuff obviously is a standard hookup, right? And there is very little effort saved on our part by pinning these things up for you in terms of a new purchase. Now, there is one caveat that I would give there. A lot of times when you're buying a machine, there are multi-implement discounts that will tie into your 3-point hitch stuff that can come with some really significant cost savings in buying a packaged tractor with an implement. So certainly consider 1 or 2 implements with your initial tractor purchase, but when it goes beyond that, don't feel like you need to pick up 3, 4, 5, 6 beyond that. You're not saving more money at that point, and it may be just as easy to come down and pick up that implement when you actually have the job for it, rather than trying to project for that stuff into the future. You may want to think differently when it comes to implements with a PTO shaft on them. When you go to pin a PTO powered implement to your tractor for the first time, you need to eyeball the length of this shaft and make sure that it's not going to bind when you lift your implement up and down. If you're not able to go through and cut one of these things yourself, it's not really difficult to do, but it's more than what you probably want to do with a hacksaw, or else you're going to be there for a really long time. You could save yourself some effort on our part by having this stuff prepped with your tractor to make sure these shafts come through ready to go. We put more and more third function kits on tractors all the time. That's a hydraulic kit that goes on to give you an operable hydraulic function out on your front loader. It enables tractors to carry a lot of the same implements that skid steers would, and opens you up to things like grapples and hydraulic augers and a lot of different attachments that would generally be found on construction equipment. Those kits are actually a fairly easy installation. There's a little bit of time savings in that on some machines you need to pull the rear tire to get back into the hydraulic hookups, but generally the installation of these kits is about 90 minutes or so, maybe 2 hours, and not a whole lot more than that. So third function kits, while I think they're wildly useful and would generally encourage most people to buy them, you absolutely can wait until down the road to find out if you have an application that really needs one. If you're considering a backhoe for your tractor, tractor, that's a piece that I certainly would say you want to consider up front. There's a very significant labor savings in doing this up front with your tractor rather than waiting later. That's because of the process that's required to go through and mount the subframes on the tractor. So we need to go through and pull the tires off in order to bolt those frames back into the axle housings. They're also going to come up and often involve your front loader as well. There's usually some bracing and stuff underneath that needs to be pulled off when that backhoe is put back on again. We'll also have implications for the hydraulics too. If you have a loader that's involved with your tractor, there's usually some plumbing that has to take place between that loader valve and your backhoe. And if you're considering a third function kit, it complicates things even further. Integrating backhoes and third function kits usually requires a certain amount of customized plumbing. You can't pull the kits off the shelves and just put that stuff together on your own. It usually requires our parts department getting involved with custom fittings. So backhoes, definitely something you want to consider buying up front. So most tractors show up at the dealership looking very much like this one, right? In some state of disassembly. And we've got a group of guys in all of our shops that go through and prep these tractors with the accessory kits and implements that you need for your applications. And when you involve the innards of the tractor, when we're getting back up inside of things that are covered up after the fact down the road, you can save yourself some money by buying things up front. But when you look into the things like 3-point hitch attachments or third function kits or work lights, things that are primarily on the outside of your tractor, there is not great labor savings doing those things down the road, and you're okay to wait and do them later and get them added onto your tractor as you find you might need them, or even choose to put them on yourself. I've put a lot of the accessory kits on my own equipment myself over the weekend. I think it's fun. It's great to go out and enjoy your equipment and accessorize it for the different jobs that you're going to be going out and doing. So you can consider that as well. There might be a certain element to this stuff that you'd like to save the shop labor yourself and go ahead and do that work on a weekend sometime. So if you're going through the process of shopping for a piece of equipment, or if you have parts or service needs for machines you've already got, give us a call at Messick's. We're available at 800-222-3373 or online at Messick's.com. The purchase of your install the subframes, okay, fun weekend project. I, for one, enjoy lantern flies. Video is ruined by lantern flies. Take 8.